Today, we'll discuss the events that occurred in Tennessee. At about 4 a.m. on December 6, 2004, a wounded young man ran into one of the convenience stores located next to the Brandon Park apartment complex in Knoxville and asked to call 911. His name was Jason Imami, and he told the dispatcher that he was sleeping in his room but was woken up by the scream of his roommate, 21-year-old Jania Berry. When he entered the living room, he saw a man coming out of Jania's room. According to Jason, after they met eyes, the uninvited guest ran up to him and stabbed him, but he managed to fight back and escape from the apartment. Subsequently, his description of the attacker helped create a composite sketch posted around Knoxville for the next 3 years. Several police cars and an ambulance were immediately dispatched to the specified address. The paramedics found Jania at the entrance to the apartment complex. Judging by the prints, she was knocking on neighboring apartments in search of help. Her bloody fingerprints were found on the doors of all the neighbors on her floor, but unfortunately, none of these people opened the door and helped her. Jania was taken to the hospital, but despite all the efforts made, doctors could not save her. During the forensic examination, the experts found 20 stab wounds on Jania's body. Jason Imami, who called 911, had 1 stab wound in the chest area and several defense wounds on his hands. The police examined the apartment. It was, of course, empty by this time. They saw signs of a struggle in Jania's room and found a bent kitchen knife in the living room. It was the weapon of the crime. The perpetrator left bloody shoe prints leading from Jania's room to Jason's room and then to the back door, through which they left the apartment complex. Jania Berry was born on August 26, 1983, in Bristol, Tennessee, about 120 miles from Knoxville. She had 2 older brothers from her mother's previous marriage. After graduating high school in 2001, Jania enrolled at East Tennessee State University to study psychology and criminology. After she left her parents' home, Joan and Mike Berry, her mother and father, moved to Atlanta, Georgia. While studying at the university, Jania met Jason White. They attended the same courses. The friendly relationship between them quickly turned into a romantic one. Jason planned to become a lawyer, and at some point, Jania decided she wanted to be a lawyer too. She graduated from East Tennessee State University in 3.5 years, after which she and Jason went to Michigan, where they both enrolled in law school. After studying there for several months, Jania realized she had made the wrong choice. 6 weeks before her death, she moved from Michigan to Knoxville, Tennessee, where she planned to continue her studies and receive a master's degree in child psychology. This is what she really liked and what she was ready to connect her life with. Jason stayed in Michigan, and their relationship was now tested by time and distance. Joan and Mike Berry supported their daughter's decision to leave law school. After all, they knew she loved children and believed it was not worth wasting your life on something you did not like. Arriving in Knoxville, Jania moved into the apartment of a friend with whom she studied at East Tennessee State University. His name was Jason Imami, and he was 2 years older. Upon learning that Jania was moving to Knoxville, Jason invited her to live in one of the rooms of his apartment in Brandon Park. Jania believed she knew Jason well. Besides, he was dating her friend, so she accepted the offer and thought she would move out as soon as she got used to the new city and the rhythm of life. Trying to provide for herself, she got a part-time job at a jewelry store. On December 5, 2004, after the end of the work shift, she said "see you" to her co-workers and went home. But in the morning, Jania died in a local hospital, and her roommate Jason became the first suspect. Jason was taken to the hospital, where doctors gave him the help he needed and concluded that his life was not in danger. When examining the crime scene, the police noticed the absence of signs of forced entry. This could indicate that the perpetrator was either let into the apartment, or that he had a key, or maybe the front door was unlocked. There was another thing that interested the investigators: the Atlanta Braves cap found on Jania's bed. It belonged to Jania's neighbor, whose car was broken into that rainy night. That neighbor, Brian McLemore, reported 2 caps stolen, along with a stereo and CDs. The investigators found them at the apartment, except for the other hat. The police believed the person who took the caps did it to protect themselves from the rain, but only one cap was found. Perhaps this meant that there were two criminals. Tests found no hair inside the hat other than its legitimate owners. Jason Imami was quickly discharged from the hospital, and, seeing the special attention to his person from the police and realizing he was being considered a suspect, he came to the police station himself to answer all the questions. Jason and Jania's relationship was the subject of special interest to the investigators. The guy said that he studied with Jania at the university and that when she moved to Knoxville, he allowed her to live in his apartment until she found her own place. According to Jason, they were just friends. The detectives then asked him about the events leading up to his 911 call. He said that he returned from work at about 10:30 p.m. At that time, Jania was at home. She was sitting on the floor in the living room, wrapping Christmas gifts for orphan children. They chatted for a while, and then he went to bed and slept until he heard Jania scream. He got out of bed to go check what was going on. When he opened the door to the living room, he saw someone coming out of Jania's bedroom. Noticing Jason, this uninvited guest ran up and punched him in the face. Allegedly, Jason fell back on his bed, after which the perpetrator stabbed him with a knife several times. Then, as Jason claimed, lying on his back, he pushed his opponent to the floor with his feet. Without thinking twice, Jason started running. When he left the apartment, he no longer heard Jania's screams. Jason believed she escaped too. Without looking back, he ran with all his might towards the convenience store at the gas station, where he asked to call 911. Jason was asked how, in his opinion, the perpetrator got into the apartment. The apartment where the crime occurred is located in this complex on the second floor. The main entrance is on the parking lot side. The glass door there always stayed open. Once inside, you enter the hall, which unites the apartments on the first floor and has a staircase leading to the second. But every apartment in this residential complex has a back door. So any apartment there can be accessed in at least two ways. Jason said he didn't know if the back door was locked because it was rarely used, mostly to take out the trash. This version matched the evidence. After all, the bloody shoe prints led precisely to the back door, and they did not match Jason's shoe prints. The investigators asked him if he was ready to take a polygraph test, to which Jason said that he was because he wanted the police not to waste their time on him but to look for the real criminal. Strangely enough, Jason failed the test. When he was informed about it, he got angry and started shouting that he was not involved in this crime. Jania's family also began to suspect Jason Imami of involvement in her death. So when Jason came to Jania's funeral, her parents didn't like it. Jason was interrogated several times, but he was adamant that he was not involved in Jania's death. He claimed they were friends and he had no reason to harm her. The results of Jason's test were studied by a more experienced polygraph examiner who concluded that the person who conducted the testing made some mistakes. This meant Jason had passed the test. Jason's description of the criminal helped create a composite sketch which began to be distributed through the media. Another suspect was Jania's boyfriend, Jason White. But he was quickly excluded from the list of suspects since on the night when the crime was committed, he was talking to Jania on the phone at about midnight, and the cell tower receiving the signal from his phone was in Lansing, Michigan, where Jason studied at law school. The attack on Jania occurred about 4 hours after her phone conversation with Jason White. The distance from Lansing in Michigan to Knoxville in Tennessee is almost 600 miles. Jason couldn't have covered such a distance in 4 hours by car. The only way he could get to Tennessee faster was by plane. But as it turned out during the investigation, Jason didn't check in for any flights. Therefore, he was excluded from the list of potential suspects. Jania's parents also did not believe Jason White could have been involved in the crime. Joan was very close to her daughter, and Jania never once mentioned Jason White's rudeness or scenes of jealousy. Moreover, the couple had planned to get married in April 2005. But now, Jason had to put the purchased ring in his bride's coffin. Jania's family still believed that her roommate, Jason Imami, might be involved in what happened to her. However, The lab report confirmed that another person was in the apartment on the night of the crime. Forensics found blood of an unknown person on the knife, on the stairs leading from the back door downstairs, in Jania's room, in Jason's room, and on the back door handle. Apparently, the perpetrator cut themselves while stabbing Jania and Jason. The resulting DNA sample of the unknown suspect was checked, but no matches were found in the database. The fingerprint found on the knife handle also didn't bring any results. There were no matches in their files. The police also checked records from local hospitals, but no one sought medical help with such cuts for several weeks after the crime. Now, the police knew that there was definitely another person in the apartment besides the victim and her roommate. And even though Jason Imami was no longer considered a suspect, many blamed him for running away from the apartment without making sure Jania had also left it. In fact, Jason was blamed for surviving. He was forced to move to another state, and that's how he later commented on what happened and how it affected his life. I also wanted to let people know that I don't want to do interviews and TV media and press releases because I don't want to be remembered as a stabbing victim. Yes, I want this guy caught and put behind bars, but I would also like to get my life back on track. Since the incident, my life is not hunky-dory as everyone thinks it is. I have had nightmares, sleeplessness, pain. People act like as if this incident does not bother me because of how I handle myself in public, but believe me, it's different at home. It's been almost 2 years since the incident, and I just finally got enough balls to get my own apartment again. My brother and sister-in-law were nice enough to give me a place to stay while I still recovered. It's hard to be almost 25 years old and to be afraid to go to bed at night in your own home. The financial strain of the incident has also produced much stress. Insurance only covered about 25% of my hospital bills for my superficial stab wounds that were 2 millimeters from puncturing my eye, severed a gland in my cheek that produces saliva, multiple cuts on my hands that weren't treated because they bagged my hands, and a chest wound that was suspected of causing a pneumothorax. So call those superficial if you want, because of deductibles not being met. Just wanted to clear up a few more things. As for me, I wanted to let everyone know that I didn't flee. I moved back here to Colorado to be with my family. I moved to Tennessee with my parents, and they moved back to Colorado after finding out it wasn't for them. I stayed to enter college at East Tennessee State University, where I graduated with a bachelor's degree in accounting. I don't speak my mind about this case because it is at the discretion of my lawyer. I am sorry. I follow his advice, not others people's advice. After the authorities published a sketch of the suspect, the police received an anonymous call informing them that a group of teenagers had been stealing in the area where Jania lived. And one of these teenagers looked like a man whose image was being distributed by the police. This guy turned out to be 19-year-old Michael Perkafell. He had facial features similar to the sketch and lived a couple of miles from the crime scene. Moreover, the police had a warrant for his arrest in an unrelated case. When he was taken to the interrogation room, the detectives noticed his shoes. The sole pattern looked like footprints found at the crime scene. While waiting for a warrant to seize his shoes and get his DNA sample, the investigators questioned Michael. Strangely enough, the guy declared his involvement in the death of Jania and began to describe the apartment and how the crime was committed. But he was confused about the details and said mostly what could be learned from the news. When his fingerprints, DNA, and shoes were checked, everything fell into place. There were no matches, and Michael, according to the investigators, just wanted to be the center of attention. Jania's family distributed over 1,000 leaflets with a sketch of the suspect. In addition, a cash reward of $70,000 was offered for any valuable information. However, all this did not bring results, and the investigation stalled for several years. Joan and Mike Berry were ready to spend the rest of their lives searching for the man who deprived them of their daughter. They were constantly calling and meeting with the investigators so that Jania's case would not turn into a dusty folder on an archive shelf. The breakthrough in the case occurred in April 2007, when one of the drivers in Tennessee saw a billboard with an image of Jania and a sketch of the criminal. This driver called the police and said that he knew a similar-looking man and that his name was Taylor Lee Olson. Taylor Lee Olson was 20 years old. He grew up in a wealthy family but often committed minor crimes. Although he had come to the attention of police previously, all of his offenses were minor, so neither his DNA nor fingerprints were in the database. When the detectives found him and brought him to the station, Olson stated that he had nothing to do with Jonya Berry's death. He allowed a sample of his DNA to be taken, after which he was released. The report from the laboratory came on September 20, 2007. It showed that DNA samples from the crime scene matched Olson's DNA. His blood was on the knife, on the stairs, and in Jonya's room. His fingerprint was on the crime weapon. Olson was arrested and charged, but he said he did not know how his blood could have ended up at the crime scene. He was interrogated several times, and in the end, he finally confessed everything. Olson told the investigators that on the night the crime was committed, he and his friend were at the apartment complex where Jonya lived. They wanted to steal a car and searched for an unlocked one, pulling on the door handles, but one of the residents saw them and shouted at them to get out. His friend ran away. As for Olson, he resorted to another method and began looking for unlocked doors in the residential complex to enter someone's apartment and steal car keys. He started checking the doors at the back of the building, and the first door that turned out to be unlocked led to the apartment where Jonya lived. Lighting his way with his phone, he examined the living room, hallway, and kitchen, but did not find the keys to the car. Then he decided to enter the room where, as it turned out, Jonya was sleeping. He opened the drawer of her bedside table and, rummaging in it for the keys, heard a woman's voice ask, "Who are you?" After that, according to Olson, the girl screamed and he felt a sharp pain in his arm. He claimed that Jonya wounded him with a knife she slept with. After that, he became enraged, took possession of the knife, and stabbed Jonya several times. However, the investigators did not believe that Jonya slept with a knife in her room. They thought that Olson, not finding the keys in the living room and kitchen, decided to break into one of the bedrooms and look for them there. Assuming that someone was sleeping there and that this someone could probably wake up, he took a knife from the kitchen and entered Jonya's room. She heard a noise, woke up, and started screaming, after which Olson attacked her with a knife. During the interrogation, he also stated that he did not remember anyone else being in the apartment except Jonya. He said he only harmed her that night. Olson insisted that he did not want to take Jonya's life and that it was an accident. "Somebody else wasn't there with you?" the detective asked. "I want to make real sure that no one was with you, just you." "No one," Olson said. "No one was with me." Shortly after, Olson radically changed his testimony, stating that the crime was committed not by him, but by his friend named Noah Cox. Cox, like Olson, had a criminal history and facial features similar to the sketch. Olson told the authorities that in December 2004, he lived with his friend Cox at Warren House, a complex located near Jonya Berry's apartment in Brandon Park. According to Olson's new story, they entered Jonya's apartment with Cox. When he entered Jonya's bedroom, she woke up and started screaming. Upon hearing the scream, Cox ran in with a knife and began stabbing her, and Olson, as he claimed, ran away and did not see what happened next. But this version seemed even less believable. In addition to the DNA of Jonya Berry and Jason Amami, the police found the DNA of only one person in the apartment and on the crime weapon, and this person was Taylor Lee Olson. There was absolutely no evidence that Cox was at the crime scene. It became known that during the investigation, the police heard Cox's name much earlier than Olson's. He was interrogated by the police 22 days after Jonya's death. He denied any involvement in this crime and gave them a sample of his DNA, which showed no matches when compared with samples from the crime scene. There were no signs of a fight on him, no cuts, no bruises, no fresh scars. Even if Cox was in Jonya's apartment that night, he left no trace. Unlike Taylor Lee Olson, records show Cox talked repeatedly with the investigators, including after Olson's arrest. He told authorities he passed out drunk in his apartment the night of the killing and found Olson gone when he awoke. Jason Imami was asked to identify the man who injured him, but he could not say for sure whether it was Olson or Cox. The trial was scheduled for September 2008. Joan Berry, Jonya's mother, had a list of questions she wanted to ask the man who deprived her of her daughter. Every now and then, she would add more questions to it, hoping to get answers soon. But on March 24, 2008, 5 months before the trial, Taylor Lee Olson was found dead in a prison cell. He took his own life. In a farewell note, Olson reiterated his innocence and blamed Cox for the death of Johnny Berry. Kevin Allen, a Knox County Assistant District Attorney General, would have prosecuted a trial in Berry's death. He said any case against Cox would have rested on self-serving claims by Olson and the testimony of 2 jailhouse snitches, one a friend of Olson who attended his funeral and the other an illegal substance user who bragged to cellmates about working with Taylor to set up Cox. There exists nothing concrete that would place anyone other than Taylor Olson and the victims at the crime scene, Allen wrote in a memo declaring the case closed. Although I find it improbable that Olson would enter into an obviously occupied dwelling alone, no forensic evidence from inside the apartment can lead me to conclude that a sustainable prosecution would be successful, Allen wrote. Although it's been closed, I don't know that the case offers closure to anyone involved, said Olson's former lawyer, Gregory Isaacs. It's one of those unfortunate crimes that will never be completely solved. Joan and Mike Berry called Olson's act the coward's admission of guilt. They had no doubt Olson took their daughter's life, but they did not exclude the possibility that Cox was also at the crime scene that night. They sued the Brandon Park apartment complex for failing to ensure the safety of residents. The parties were able to reach an agreement out of court. In 2007, the Johnny Berry Act was signed into law in Tennessee, requiring the collection of DNA samples from persons convicted of serious crimes and persons arrested and accused of such crimes. Who, in your opinion, bears a greater resemblance to the sketch, Olson or Cox? Share your opinion in the comments, and thank you for watching this video to the end.